the byproduct of increased awareness of God is an increased awareness of self and an increased awareness of flesh.
Hey, welcome to Ascend the Hill with Jeremy Austill. I'm Jonathan, this is Pastor Jeremy, and we are in day 3, as we're recording this, of the fast. How's it going?
Well, it's going.
Yeah.
Like any fast,
Yeah.
it's a grind. It has layers of difficulty to it, but that's the reason you do it. It is a stripping down of self. It is a very humbling experience in the sense that you start becoming a little more aware of you and aware of your deficiencies and just the weakness of being a human.
Yeah.
And but at the same time, it should, in that weakness, cause you to lean into and find great gratefulness for the strength of God and the grace of God. And so that's kind of where I am. Day 3.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful for the grace and the strength of God in my weakness. So.
Yeah. Well, we won't necessarily talk about food today.
Yeah, let's not do a let's not do would you rathers on what you'd eat. Let's not do that.
Well, there is the first one has something to do with liquid. No, it has food. It has food in it.
Well,
but the other ones do not.
We'll do it. We'll go ahead. We'll go ahead.
So would you rather? This is New Year's related.
It is New Year's. Hey, this is our first podcast of the year,
2025.
Yes, we started back to the office at the end of last week, but it really feels like today is the first, like for me anyway, kickoff of the new year because I like rhythm and routine. And so I found that like I didn't really feel like I got started until A, we started fasting, and B, we got to the office today. But so now it feels like the year's really rolling.
Yeah, and for this first one, it's about New Year's specifically. I think all of these are, but New Year's resolution specifically. Would you rather make a resolution to give up meat for the new year, all year, or give up drinking anything other than water all year?
Whoa, that's a tough one. Give up meat for the year.
Or drink only water for the year.
Or drink only water for the year. Well, I'm not, I've taken a couple days to not do coffee. And that's hard for me, just to be real transparent. I didn't realize how dependent I was on it. But man, the thought of no meat for a year, I think I would try to just do the water and hope that my system got flushed of its dependence on caffeine and I reset, because I enjoy meat. So that'd probably be, that's a tough one, man. Because I mean, you're talking about two of my favorite things, like coffee and meat. So, man, that's not a fair question, but those are the best kind. So I'll say I would drink only water for the year as my one liquid, because that's really all I drink. I drink water and coffee. I don't really drink anything else. Rarely do I drink something other than those two things. So.
Well, the next one, would you rather be invited to the White House to celebrate New Year's Eve, or have a celebrity chef come to your house to make New Year's Eve dinner?
To the White House to celebrate New Year's Eve, or a chef to make me a dinner? I want to go to the White House.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're going to have a good meal. Like, it's going to be an incredible, experience. It's probably a once in a lifetime experience. I could probably save up enough money through the year and say, okay, I'm going to hire a chef to come cook me a meal. But to go to the White House, I think that's not something you necessarily will ever get the opportunity to do, other than your typical Washington, D.C. tour. I've toured the White House in 8th grade on our Washington, D.C. trip.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would choose that. I think it would be cool. And I would say that, I mean, this will be we'll throw some controversy in, regardless of who the president was, because whether we agree with them or not, the honor of being there, and if you're asked there, then maybe you have a voice, and you leverage that voice. I don't know.
And history is cool, and so it's fun. It's fun to just see stuff. That's last one. Would you rather spend New Year's Day in a home with no internet, or a home without indoor plumbing?
Oh, a home with no internet.
Okay.
I mean, yes, absolutely. I need the
Ma-
indoor plumbing.
Maybe it's the Gen Z crowd who probably would hesitate on that one. I don't
Yeah, no. I
know.
just think about like what would shut your life down more? I mean, I guess you could. Well, I guess you could. Either way, you could leave your house and find. I mean, the internet. I mean, your phone is 5G, right? So you don't need internet to operate on your phone.
True. Yeah.
So I mean, I found the loophole.
Okay.
But the plumbing, it's like I don't really want to have to go to Walmart to go to the bathroom. You know?
Or have an outhouse somewhere
Yeah, yeah,
outside or
yeah, yeah.
anything.
No, so I'm gonna say yes to indoor plumbing. That's what I want.
Yeah.
Yeah, more than the internet even.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about New Year's. We had our first Sunday of New Year's
Yes, we did.
and I had a one-off sermon. I saw a cloud, or I saw the cloud.
I see a
I
cloud.
see a cloud. I can't
Yes.
remember. It's been a few
Well,
days.
you're kind of leaning into our next
Yeah,
sermon series.
I did mix up the two
Yeah,
words.
yeah. See and saw.
Yeah.
See
I
saw.
see a cloud about Elijah in the Old Testament, and it's a pretty interesting story because of the context around what's happening in Israel at the time
Yes.
with Ahab and Jezebel and the prophets of Baal. And in the middle of this, there's a drought, and there's 3.5 years of a drought, I believe. And then it goes into the Lord telling Elijah that he's going to send rain soon. And so we're in the whole, if you missed the sermon, go back and listen to it, watch it on YouTube, or you can go back and listen to it in the podcast feed. But, it's talking about faith and prayer. And even on Sunday, we were talking about faith. And I wonder if God had already said to Elijah that he was going to send rain soon, why do you think he still went and prayed for rain to come?
It's a great question. I think in large part because that is God's process. That is God's formula. That is his way. And Elijah the prophet would have known through a lifetime of covenantal communion with God that when God is operating in the earth, part of the process is prayerfulness.
Yeah.
And so I believe he understood this is the word, but now I have a responsibility to that word to be faithful and determined in the place of prayer to pray it into fruition. It is that divine partnership, and it is that. I mean, you look at one of the more prominent moments in Old Testament literature. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves, seek my face, and pray, I'll hear them. I'll heal their land. Well, he had prophesied to them, like, anytime you find yourself in dark times, my intention is to heal. My intention is to restore. My long-term objective is to bring you back into the fold. But there is a response that needs to come from you. And I just feel like Elijah understood his place. He understood his role of spiritual authority in the nation of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And I would even take that into our lives today, like to understand your role of spiritual authority in your own life. That God has positioned you and he's given you authority to pray, to declare, to speak his word, to operate in faith, to live in obedience. And when you do that, it engages the divine.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a great question. And I kind of touched on it a little, just the interesting idea that there was momentum.
Mm-hmm.
There was momentum in the spirit. He could hear a cloud, or he could hear the sound of an abundance of rain.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a word from God that rain was coming. And so we talked about it a little bit. So what's the point of praying? And a lot of people say, well, God's sovereign. Why do I need to pray?
Yeah.
But you just see through the whole of Scripture that prayer and interaction are a part of God's process. And there are a lot of questions that come with that. Well, why? Mm-hmm. Why does God want us to pray? Why do we need to pray? Why can't God just do it?
Yeah.
And I come all the way back to creation account and the clear communication that God did not create humanity as this entity that he was just going to like snap his fingers and do whatever. It was a part of God's great joy and delight in creating humanity to have someone in his image that he could relationally co-labor with and do something together with.
Yeah.
God loves doing things together with us.
Hmm.
And that, I believe, is maybe the biggest reason that we're called to pray, is because it is God's delight to do the thing with us, and our way of doing it with him, because we can't perform the miracle. We can't, we can't make the rain come, but
Hmm.
our part of participation is to pray, to prophesy, to declare.
Yeah. And do you think, in light of that, do you think Elijah was maybe more or less praying, like we've talked before, of just like thanking the Lord and also just saying, thank you that rain's coming. And I pray that you bring it quickly, like almost like positioning himself in a unifying way rather than a way of like, I hope the Lord, I hope you send rains. I know you said it, so let me pray in a certain way. Is that kind
Yeah,
of like,
yeah. I mean, of course, it's interesting that it doesn't tell us what he prayed. He just put his
yeah,
head between his knees. It just showed us the posture.
yeah,
Um, and I think the posture is even interesting. When he prayed on Mount Carmel the first time for fire to come down, he did a very vocal public prayer.
oh yeah,
But in this particular prayer, it was private. It was quiet. It was his head between his knees. We don't get the language. In the Mount Carmel fire prayer, we literally have the verbatim prayer that he prayed in the
yeah,
text. In this moment on Mount Carmel, again, with the rain, we don't have any of that. And it's almost this indicator of there are layers of how to pray,
yeah,
to pull down fire and to pull down rain, to pull down from heaven into the earth. Sometimes it is public, declarative, heard by others. So it can either be agreed upon by others, or it can serve as a test of like, I'm praying this and others are going to hear it and watch what God does. And then there's layers of prayer that it is us shutting ourselves away in the secret with God and saying, I know that you intend to do this. I
hmm,
know that you're going to send rain. Lord, I'm just standing with you in it in prayer. Send the rain, Lord. I'm standing with you in unity. You kind of use that word. I'm standing with you in partnership. I'm standing with you in communion. I want you to do this thing in the earth, and you got somebody in the earth that is committed to the same thing you're committed to.
yeah,
And there's a beauty in that. There's a richness in that. You mentioned, I don't want to divert us, but you mentioned uh, kind of me giving the backstory in the sermon of what was happening there. And, I do that, especially when I'm preaching an account, a story, if you will. I don't really like to call them stories because they're real. And sometimes the word story indicates maybe something that's not real. These are accounts, they actually happen.
yeah,
Um, but a lot of times I give the backstory and take my time doing it, and I hope it's enjoyed and appreciated by the body. um I just never want to assume what everybody does and doesn't know.
yeah,
And a part of preaching is Bible education. And so when I'm giving backstory, sometimes the backstory is really necessary to like lift the text off the page so you really understand what's happening. Other times, the backstory I felt like this week was, hey, here's Bible education.
hmm,
Not everybody has been in the faith 30 years.
yeah,
Some folks in our church have been in the faith 3 years, and maybe this is really the first time they've come across this happening. So let me explain what was happening, because we're educating the body.
yeah,
We're equipping the body, we're educating the body. So anyway, that's
yeah.
an aside. When you said that earlier, it made me think like I'd like to explain why I do that sometimes.
Yeah, and in the same vein of talking about backstory, is there any backstory to why he sent rain then? Because you mentioned and alluded to earlier that the Lord will restore. Like he talks to the nation, says, "Anytime you return to me, I'll restore you." But Ahab and Jezebel were still there. Is there an indication anywhere in the story, or even prior or post, of why he sent the rain? Was it the people? Um, was it something else?
I believe it was on the heels of the great reckoning with the Baal worship on
Mm,
Mount Carmel. it was a showdown between the priests of Baal and Elijah, where God proved he was the one true God. And Elijah, in that moment, because of the great thing God had done, now Elijah, once again, partnering, co-laboring with God, he laid down the gauntlet on the priests of Baal. He threw down the challenge. He built an altar. The Bible tells us that he dug a trench around it and filled it, with water, almost to make it an impossible scenario. Drenched the whole thing, and then God sends fire and consumes all of the altar and all of the water around it. So God does this miraculous thing that Elijah co-labored in
Yeah.
once again. And then on the heels of that, now there's so many, we don't know how many, but there was priests of Baal, there was Elijah, and then there were observers.
Yeah.
And in that moment, and the spirituality, the covenant relationship of Israel was in the balance. They had been unfaithful because of their leadership.
Hmm.
They had been led astray. So God demonstrated, hey, I'm the one. And then they went and again, I alluded to it on Sunday. It's an uncomfortable text, but they went and they um, apprehended and they killed all of the priests of Baal.
Yeah.
And in doing that, there was a purging of the immorality. There was a moment of purging. Now, Ahab and Jezebel weren't done, because we'll find out later on, and I'll probably preach on this more. I think I'm going to preach on Elijah post-Easter,
Yeah.
Elijah and Elisha. So you'll find that Ahab and Jezebel weren't quite done with their rule and reign then, but something broke in the nation. Something changed on Mount Carmel in the nation. The spiritual trajectory changed. And I feel like that's probably, once those priests of Baal were dealt with, it's like, okay, now I'm going to send the rain.
Yeah.
Because even when a king is wicked, if the hearts of the people would have been pure, if the hearts of the people would have turned to the Lord.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. We talked about the faith aspect of his prayer. Does this aspect of the story they eradicated the idols they had set up, and we're going through a fast now, does that also relate to our own lives of like, hey, if you're going through something, maybe you need to look at things that you may have set up in your life, whether intentional or unintentional, and do your best on your part to get rid of them? How does that part of the story relate to what we're going through right now?
It's a very astute observation, and I would agree with it wholeheartedly. The rain was precipitated by the destruction of idols, and likewise in our lives, there are things that can't come to us until we reorder our lives. Whether that is repenting of sin and cutting it out of our lives, or it is the actual prioritization of being in God's presence, being in the Word, being in prayer, or it is, I need to step into obedience past my fear in this area. I'm afraid, and I've been nervous, and I've been anxious, and I need to cross over into obedience. But most rain is, precipitated by something from the earth. There is. I alluded to it, and I've taught on it before. I'm not a meteorologist, so I can't speak fully authoritatively. But general understanding is, rain is the byproduct of vapor, which is water on the earth that is evaporated and ascended into the heavens and accumulated, right? And then you get the perfect conditions in the atmosphere, in the heavens, if you will, and rain comes. And I do really believe that one of the vapors, if you will, is removing idols, repenting of sin, reordering our lives, reprioritizing our lives, diverting ourselves from things that we've given affections to that has replaced our affections for God. There's nothing wrong with having affection for other things, as long as those affections don't become an encumbrance, a hindrance on your affections for God.
Yeah.
So, yes, I believe that. And so now you correlate that to the fasting this is a fasting is a time of stripping away.
Mhm.
And it's almost like the natural act of stripping ourselves dietarily, of making a stripping away decision with what we eat and consume in the natural, has a way of helping us almost in the sense of like, if I can do that, I can cut this, I can remove this, but it also just makes us more aware.
Yeah.
As we become more aware of God, the byproduct of increased awareness of God is an increased awareness of self and an increased awareness of flesh.
Mhm.
And it you got to be careful to not slip into some shame-ridden condemnation, but at the same time, like if I'm looking at him and it's revealing stuff in me, that's a really good thing. It's a good thing if my weakness is being exposed. It's a good thing if my inconsistencies are being exposed. It's a good thing if I'm suddenly getting the revelation of areas where I'm not congruent with him, because when it gets lifted up off the page, when it gets illuminated, when it gets revealed to me, now I have the opportunity to deal with it, to
Yeah.
address it, to take a knife to it, if you will.
Yeah. So do you see that as when those things happen, do you see that as God almost using that to maybe empower us to make those changes? Like he's revealing things to us. What and you mentioned shame, like we can either be ashamed of it or try to work on it. Do you think that's maybe the Lord's mercy and grace in the fasting season of saying, "Hey, here's where you're falling short, but it's okay. Let's go this."
Yes.
You know?
One thing that I think is really important when it comes to shame is, especially when we start seeing ourselves a little differently and think, man, I need to improve here, I need to grow there. Um, is you got to remember that God was still with you before you realized that.
Mm, yeah,
He was
yeah.
still he was still loving you. He was still active. I am amazed. I'm amazed at God's capacity
hmm
um, to work with us in our imperfections, and him being fully aware of all of our flaws and all the ways that we're not good enough and all the ways that we've not arrived yet and all
Yeah.
the improvements that need to be made. I am amazed at his capacity, sorry, to just be patient and continue to be really good to us through that.
hmm
And because I know that about him, I have no need to live in shame. I
Yeah.
know that he's growing me, and I know that he's committed to me in my weakness, and he's committed to me in my deficiencies. He's committed to me in spite of all the stuff that he knows about me. Now, my response to that is not, okay, I'm a mess, I'm imperfect. It's cool if I stay that way. No, my
hmm
response is, and you love me that much.
Mm,
You love me that much, and you were that good to me. I want to honor you.
yeah.
I want to trim it away. I want to cut it away.
hmm
And I want to be an available vessel for everything you want to pour out. But there's some stuff in the cup, so to speak, that's got to get out so the good stuff can get in.
yeah.
Um, but yes, the thing with shame, I hate it because it's so sneaky
hmm
and it just doesn't take enough account of God's goodness and his love and his mercy. And I mean, I'm just sitting here. I mean, I feel like I'm doing pretty good in life, just
hmm
admittedly. I mean, I know younger and lesser versions of myself. I feel like I've grown a lot.
yeah.
Um, but I also look back on all those years when I still needed to grow and improve, and I still need to grow and improve. And I'm telling you right now, and I mean, I'm 3 days into this fast, and it's like a mirror, and it's tough to look at sometimes. There's a
yeah.
mirror right there. Um, but I think about the younger me and what I needed to grow in, but he was still active and he still moved mightily, and he's
hmm
just really good and he's really patient.
Yeah.
And so yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's a good because I think we talked about on Sunday about reflecting on what God has done, and I think you brought up a good perspective of realizing that He answered prayers for you, for me, for people watching when we may have been at a really low point
Hmm.
personally, but He still came through, and it's like,
Yes.
Why did you come through when I was still a mess? It's like,
Yes.
well, you're still his kid.
Yes. There's a goodness in him.
Yeah.
There's a goodness in him that is hard for us to comprehend, um, because we're not nearly as patient or long suffering. We're not nearly as merciful and gentle as he
Mhm.
is. And he is holy, but he is merciful and gentle. And he is the ultimate judge, um, but he's also the ultimate sacrifice.
Mhm.
It's just a fascinating, and it's something we have to constantly work through in our minds and deal with.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah, and as we, start to wrap up, we ended that sermon. We're entering into, or we're in the beginning days of fasting, and we're in the beginning days of a new year. And so I think the question comes around almost every year, where we hear a sermon like this, we get the principles from about faith, even the principles we talked today about, you know, holding the mirror of scripture up to our lives, and or even that play themselves out in fasting because you're hungry. And how do we make sure that we don't lose it after week 1, week 2, or after the after month 1, it's like, okay, February, same old, you know.
well, I'm a big believer in incremental, small change has compound interest.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, uh, I think one of the reasons we struggle in the beginning of the year is because we try to make wide sweeping changes of our life, and sometimes that's needed. Sometimes it's like I have to quit this, and
Yeah.
it's a massive life change. Um, but I think we underestimate the small change, and we underestimate consistency.
Mm.
We underestimate the compound interest of consistency and just being faithful over and over and over again, making
Yeah.
slight adjustments. Um, but I think you're right in that we start a year most of the time with optimism.
Mhm.
I mean, there's some that are listening that there's been so much negative, it's hard to be optimistic. But most people start the new year with this burst of optimism of what can be. And I think that's beautiful. I think it's good. I think in the fast and just in general, whatever you're optimistic about and whatever you're believing for, and that's kind of what the message ultimately was about, was God has great things in your future.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean that there aren't hard things in our future. There are hard
Yeah.
things ahead of us. I mean, I'm 46. There are hard days ahead of me. Like I know that.
Yeah.
But there are also unbelievable days, and there are great victories, and there are miraculous breakthroughs, and there's abundant provision, and there is wide sweeping moves of his hand. There's the wind of his spirit, there's the
Mhm.
fire of his passion, there is increase in ways that you just only could imagine. All of that's in the future, right? I believe that. And so this is about contending until. This is about like not giving up on that and leaning into that.
Yeah.
What is it that you are waiting for? Don't give up on it.
Mhm.
It might have been a 3.5 year drought, but don't give up on it because within the promise of a drought is a promise of rain.
Mm.
It's coming.
Yeah.
Don't give up. Pray. Keep looking. Be persistent. Probably my favorite part of the message Sunday was when we spent some time talking about how he peered, he looked, he perceived, because he was spiritually focused.
Mm.
He was a person that was attentive to the things of God. He was looking for the activity of God. He had an awareness of God in all of his actions, and I have found that people that are focused spiritually, people who are looking for the move of God, people who are um, working to be aware of God's activity in their lives,
Mhm.
it's amazing how those people see, feel, and experience more of God and His work. And so, man, a lot of the Sunday message was a call to spiritual focus, a call to be not nominal Christians, but to be people that are very serious about our faith. I don't mean serious as in gruff or
Mm.
stern or stoic. I mean serious in the sense of it is the priority of my life.
Yeah.
Period.
Mhm.
And you think, well, I can't pray all the time. I'm not a monk. I'm not a nun. I can't. Right. But so, how do you make him the priority? Well, you make sure there's nothing in your life that isn't filtered through him, that isn't
Yeah.
touched by him. My parenting is, my being a husband is, obviously my work is at church, but everybody's work is. All of our activities, even the the fun things, our hobbies. Like, how does that connect with God? How is he a part of that? Um, Man, I just want us to be a deeply spiritually focused church. And that's from the person that's been here 40 years to the person that's been here 4 weeks, you know, to the person that's very experienced in the things of God, to the person that's inexperienced. You can be inexperienced but focused.
Mhm.
That's the thing about focus, as you don't have to be. But I also would say to the person that's less experienced, what I mentioned before, compound interest. The longer you live with the Lord, you find the more he consumes of your life.
Yeah.
The increase of him in the whole of your life. He is the yeast that works its way through the whole batch. The longer you walk with him, it should be anyway. If it's not, it's really problematic. You don't have Jesus, you have religion. You
Mhm.
have a form of godliness, but you deny the power thereof, as Paul told Timothy. But you have like that longevity with him. He just works his way into everything.
Mhm.
And man, that's the life I want to live, like where he just works his way into everything.
Yeah. And if that's the life that you want to live, whether you're trying to get there in this fast or you're trying to develop your spiritual focus, we are here for you. So reach out to us, leave a comment, reach out to us through the website, cornerstonenashville.org, or be here in person Wednesdays at 6:30 p.m., Sundays 8:30 a.m., 10:30 a.m. And if you miss all that, you can watch us online at csnlive.org. Regardless, we're here for you on this fast. We hope that it's going well for you, and we're here for you. So connect with us, and we can't wait to see you next time on the podcast.